Hi, I'm Kelsey, and this is Anna and Cassie doing part 2 of assignment 1. We're going to go through some information about each of our own school contexts in reflections on technology. So I'm going to start. I'm going to share my screen. And just like that, technology starts off with a bang. So this is my reflection for the context that I work in, Children's Autism Services in Edmonton. So I work with preschool age students, and that obviously for me in reflecting my use of technology, I was sort of thinking about myself in my role as an administrator more than I was in the classroom, because I find that we don't use a lot of technology besides assistive technology in our classrooms with our population of kids. Their developmental trajectory is already on an atypical path, so we are trying to kind of engage them in the social world. So it's sometimes can be a bit of a barrier when we add technology because they get so interested in that and hyper fixated on it. So I'm going to try to talk about both sides of it in this presentation. So my use of technology has definitely shifted a lot since COVID. I felt like before COVID as an administrator, I was using it as an alternative to connection. So things like collaborative documents and email and text messages, but it wasn't ever replacing an in-person meeting or being directly in a classroom. Whereas during COVID and after COVID, I'm sure it's kind of the primary means for collaboration. So we're using it for Zoom meetings, we're screencasting, we're doing a lot more with our organizing things, and just using it personally as like my Google Calendar and I have a sticky note app, so that it's just everything's now living on my computer, which is a big shift from where we were at before. And the students also had a massive shift with COVID. We were really trying to limit screen time, engaging them with iPad apps for communication and visual support, like schedules, as well as some different sensory play and kind of break opportunity. But now they're on Zoom at least an hour a day with their teachers and consultants. And they're still using the apps, the communication tools, things like that. But I'm finding that there's a lot more behavior management happening where parents are trying to work from home. So they're giving their kids their iPads to just have some time to play and kind of stay preoccupied. So that's definitely been a big shift for me. And so when I started to think about that, I was starting to think about how that sort of shifted my beliefs and practices as an educator. In Alberta, the mandate is that technology can be used to support student learning. And so things like instructional and environmental supports are put in place to support independence. And those can include things like adaptive equipment, visual and organizational supports, and those can all be technology. And so one of the class readings that really resonated with me was Anderson and Putman talking about technology can help teachers meet the individual needs of students with disabilities by helping them with content, providing different ways to represent the curriculum, and supporting differentiated instruction. So thinking about how this might affect my practice, technology is a helpful tool for adapting programming and providing visual support and giving opportunities for communication. But I think for me, the main goal is that it needs to be purposeful. So for the young students that I'm working with, definitely that developmental factor is in place. So if we're bringing technology in, there needs to be a good reason for it, like communication or like having some turn-taking or back and forth engagement. And so with my role as a consultant, I'm providing teachers with different strategies, but I want them to see that they can be successful in their implementation in an easy way. So I want them to be able to apply new strategies or new supports because I've told them easy bites they can take to kind of build toward that end goal. Because selecting the approach for teaching has to be meaningful and purposeful. So we're making that decision that a teacher will want to carry out when we leave the classroom. And when teachers are able to familiarize themselves with technology, they can move forward in adding new features themselves, but being able to do that with a consultant and practicing together can be a really good opportunity. And so I think kind of when I sum that all up and kind of my beliefs in technology, I'm thinking around purposeful innovation will lead to successful implementation. So thinking about purposeful opportunities to practice using technology in the classroom can help lead to making it successful in kind of moving forward. And I just have a list of references here.
Kelsey, I love how you really approached it from a like pre-COVID to now, because I think if you look at this course and how the timing of it, we've been talking so much about how it's so relevant.
Mhm.
So I think it's just so interesting for you to make that comparison. So I have a question for you. If you have to shift back after COVID, and yeah, I know it's going to take us a long time to get back to the point where we are in a normal classroom situation, what are you going to take from this experience of being forced into this technology rich environment, but then put that back into the context of when life is back to normal?
Yeah, it's super interesting. We've been talking a lot about that because on top of COVID, Alberta has also received a massive change to our budget. And so we were already looking at ways to build some cost savings, find some efficiencies in our resources. And so we've already been talking about some of the things that we're going to keep, like online virtual IP meetings, because we are having 5 professionals drive to school, getting paid their time, and we can get both parents on the screen when usually one parent's at home with the kid or at work. And so there's some different resource efficiencies that we're looking at. And I think that it's also a way to get into parents' homes more frequently than having visits once or twice a week. They could be in there just for 20 minutes a day, little snips to kind of just practice skills. And I think that our consultant team will definitely keep them to that.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Good job. I suppose I will go next and discuss sort of technology in my school's context. My context is a little bit different. I'm going to share my screen here as well. My school is a little bit different in that I teach at a high school, and also my role is different. I'm sort of in a weird spot where I'm an administrator and an educator right now. And so how I use technology is really different given what shoes I'm filling or what hat I'm wearing for that specific interaction. And for me, I kind of split how I use technology as both. I think what I'm finding as an educator is I've definitely been using it since the beginning of my career, and my ideas about it have evolved. And I think at this point in my career, I've used it to supplement a lot of my pedagogical risks and ideas. And rather than trying to implement Twitter, implement TikTok now, or implement PowerPoints, I'm planning first and then seeing how technology can supplement and make it better and engage the kids, or differentiate instruction, or design it so that everybody can have the right access and equitable opportunities. And I think that's where I've definitely grown as an educator. I think what I've started to do as well is use it as a professional learning network. I think this is technically professional development for the 3 of us, right? And it's happening on a Sunday evening, right? So it's an interesting way to use technology to learn from other people and kind of get ideas when you're not geographically able to connect. And I really like how technology allows me to do that. As an administrator, that hat is really different, and how I use technology is mainly to have students be more accountable. I think in this COVID era, what we've done as administrators is split up children who perhaps are at risk. And I've had to get in touch with kids as a first line of, hey, you haven't been submitting assignment 1, 2, and 3, where is that? And then when I haven't heard back, all of a sudden I'm broadening and trying to connect, and now bringing the parents into the discussion, right? And it's a way to keep kids accountable and giving them opportunities to be accountable for themselves, I think, too, right? I've found that once I get in touch with parents, I tend to get responses pretty quick. So that's been a good way to keep connected to that part of the community. And the other way, I think, given COVID, is we've been using social media to connect with the community as well. So we've been live streaming events on our Instagram. We've been using Twitter to connect with other schools and seeing what they're doing for graduation, right? And what they're doing to celebrate. We have an honor roll assembly, right? So we're going to try and live stream that. We've been live streaming masses, which has been a huge effort from our campus ministry to do that, because we don't have to, but for a part of our community, it's important to them. So that's a huge way we've been using it. I think in terms of our TME here, our environment, I think we've done a really good job at our school with our resources in that we're a one-to-one school. We're full G Suite. We've mentioned it a couple of times already. And so we've been really blessed to have funding enabled in place for us to be that type of school. There are definitely some teachers that are taking pedagogical risks with technology. We've got access to, those cardboard VR goggles that some of our science teachers are using to really, really take a look at organs and biology in the human body. And then also we've been working with some extracurricular clubs to collaborate on making our social media both friendly to staff and to students, but also to connect to our wider community, right? What does our alumni want to see? What do our parents want to see? And then I think we've been really, really lucky in terms of getting funding. We just got a robotics lab installed a year ago. So we've now got a robotics program basically from donations, and we received funding to renovate our library. And now a part of our library is opened up to a learning commons space where kids can rent it out to do presentations, and it's study space. And so it's really evolved, but that's not coming from our tuition. That's coming from outside donors, and our advancement team really reaching out to families to help us out. I think where we can improve is building capacity in our teachers, a little bit more professional development. And also, I think that sometimes we're fundraising for what shines and what's bright. And, in room X, Y, and Z, the window still doesn't close fully and there's leaks and we don't fix that, but we have a robotics lab, right? And we have a resource teacher whose caseload is, 30-1, but we have a robotics lab. So we could fund and bring in a different staff member and spread our funding out a little bit, but that doesn't really happen at our school right now. And I think our priorities are different, and we should be investing in other spots. We have a couple of stakeholders, but I feel like we'll get to that later on. And I think the other thing that I'd like to mention is our connection to our strategic plan, which is something that we've talked about for the last 5 years, is how do we use technology to strengthen our curricular program. And I think perhaps that's why we've invested so much funding into technology. It's because we're trying to invest in our facilities and tools, that says right there, to improve the educational experience. And I think it's doing that, and it's connecting why we're funding into this plan, and it gives us a goal and a mission for sure. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. Do you guys, I'm just curious, do you guys have tech fees that go on top of your tuition, or is it, funded elsewhere?
So it started out as a student fundraiser. We were able to get Chromebooks from a student-led fundraiser, actually, which was really cool. And then it evolved from there. Once we started to see use for it, our principal put it forward to the board, and then now it becomes one-to-one. Now, because it's one-to-one and the risks of perhaps breaking those Chromebooks are higher, there is a fee on top of the tuition. But it also pays for G Suite and increased connectivity and all that stuff. So it was an interesting sell to our parent community for sure, right? Because it's like, here we have tuition. Why are we paying an extra fee to have it? But I think our tech guy said that 10% of our Chromebooks break down every year, and so the cost of that needs to be incorporated. We're not just buying the Chromebooks and then they're there. It's sustainability, right? And it's helping us repair ones that are broken. So yeah,
that's
similar.
Yeah, and that's the consideration with technology, is the sustainability, right? Is you get this really amazing tool, but if you don't maintain and upgrade that tool, it quickly loses its lifespan, right? Like a Chromebook needs to be updated, or you need to have a certain percentage that are going to have to be replaced every year. So thinking about how you can have that longevity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll stop my share there.
All right, I guess it's my turn. So I'm going to share my infographic that I made. So I approached it a little more from kind of a personalized, like where I came from, where I am now, and then where I'm going, because I feel as though in my current position at Rundle Private School here in Calgary, I have all these things that I've kind of done in the past that have really allowed me to do the things that I want to do and use my strengths. And where I am now, the school is very set in how they do things. And so I find myself in a little bit of an internal battle of what do I really believe is kind of my pedagogical philosophy, and then how can I actually implement that every day, and then where do I actually see myself going, because I don't feel where I am now I am fulfilling my potential. So I know we've done a lot of research, or we've done a lot of talks about, you know, really recognizing our strengths, our beliefs, our values, and how that really determines why we believe certain things. And so I've looked back at, you know, my own school days, and where and we'll talk about, you know, difference of age and socioeconomic status here afterwards. We have an idea, but, you know, growing up, I was right. All three of us were right in the heart of the development of technology in education, with the internet, with all the classrooms eventually having computers, and all these additional tech supports that you were talking about, Kelsey, have come into education. And so we were going along with that, but with my own personality of always wanting to do more, or always wanting to do a great job. I always wanted to adapt and embrace all of those technologies. And I think that's why I learned them, and I think I was good at it. And so having, you know, teachers tell me in early commuter courses in high school, oh, you know, like, you've done such a great job, that for me really boosted my confidence in using the different technologies. And I think really fueled the beginning of my career as a teacher, because I wanted to try all those things out. I wasn't scared to learn with the students, and I wasn't worried about failing in front of them, because I knew I was learning alongside them. So I think that for me has given me my foundation for how I approach technology in the classroom, because I really am okay with learning alongside the students, and because there's so much more out there. And so ideally, if I look at myself as a teacher, it's really technology supports in the classroom for me boost efficiencies so that I can provide different opportunities for those students and really complement what I'm doing. But Cassie, you talked a lot about connection, and I think for me that is most important. And what I've tried to do with technology is to first have that connection, and then on top of that, use those different technologies to engage or bring something in that wouldn't be done otherwise. Yeah. So I think it's taken me time to get to that point, but that's kind of where my ideal is. And I also think that, you know, you talked about the idea of an administrator and their role of the whole data tracking. And for me, technology has allowed me to do a lot more data tracking and analysis of that data from a student and a teacher perspective, so that I can help them grow the most. So at my school right now, we have a lot of online programs that help support our program, whether that's a reading online platform, whether it's a math one. And what that allows us to do is to track all of their achievements, so that we can go back and really see where those gaps are, so that we can personalize that learning and help them with those gaps. So that technology has been really valuable for me as a teacher if I look at my current situation. And then I look at kind of, you know, going into the future and the idea of leadership. And I'm in a smaller leadership position now, but, you know, when I look at an administrator, I think these are just kind of the words that come to mind of what I want to make sure that I am, because, you know, a lot of the readings that we've talked about, and you'll see further along here with Alberta Ed, is the idea of being a collaborator. You know, as we move forward, and I get older, you know, I try my best to stay current, and that is such an important thing for me. But you have so many people who are so great at what they do that bring in those new ideas and new technologies, new platforms, new apps. I think as a leader, we need to sit back and learn from those people. And we aren't just the person who is going to tell everybody what to do. We need to look at it as that learning together, and just be that compass for all of those different stakeholders so that they can teach us as we move forward. And I think that as a leader is how you're going to empower people. So that's how I see myself, you know, kind of moving forward. And then quickly, if I look at Alberta Ed, they have a document released 2013. That's their policy guidelines for technology use in the classroom. And so they have this really great quote that talks about that idea of connection and the power to support innovation and discovery, not just helping aid teaching. So the idea is that we're engaging learners to use technologies as designers and creators of knowledge, rather than just, Kelsey, you talked about it before, as, you know, you start by just giving them something else to do, as opposed to providing them with that opportunity to create new knowledge from that technology. So I think I really resonate actually with this, and it's interesting doing this assignment is I didn't actually know that this existed. And so doing this, you find different things. You're like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I think that if I look down at the bottom here from my infographic I'm always amazed at how things have changed from when this morning, one of the friend of mine just told me a story of her daughter who is 3, and how she was pretending to call my daughters on her wrist. So she was swiping on her wrist, just saying, oh, Amelia and Molly, I'm going to call you. Yeah. And that's the reality of her generation, is that she can call her friend on her wrist.
Yeah. They're saying now that kids are learning to flip or to swipe a screen before they're learning how to flip a page of a book developmentally.
It's shocking to me, right? And how things have changed. Mm-hmm. But I also, at the same time, I think I'm a lot more aware now of the importance of that real connection and the authenticity of the connection you have while you're teaching our individual students. Mm-hmm. So that's my evolution.
I think what's kind of hanging over top the 3 of us right now too, that we've been trying to integrate into it, is this idea of like, well, not everybody can afford an Apple Watch, right? And not everybody can afford a laptop. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people can afford sending their kids to where, you know, Anna and I teach, right? So it's, I know we all read that reading by Colin Mittal, and we're talking about whether are people just born into this generation and then they're going to get it and live with it for the rest of their lives and know better than the 3 of us. Mm-hmm. Or is it forever going to be the haves and the have-nots in terms of money, not in terms of access?
Yeah. And that worries me in this pandemic is, are we, you know, they were saying in that article that, you know, it really, a big part of it has to do with your socioeconomic status and not necessarily that age. So are we actually widening that gap?
Mm-hmm. Well, we think about like parents who are English second language and not as technology literate either. Like you talked a lot about this, Anna, where you kind of like, it's true. We grew up in the generation where we learned it as it came out. But for some of these parents, they are so uncomfortable with the idea of tech and tech integration. Yeah. So to have to support their 13-year-old who's saying, I need help with my computer, that must be really overwhelming for them to be thinking about and to be trying to navigate through when teachers are pushing technology, right?
Yeah. I think for my individual context, you know, I do teach at a private school, and so I definitely acknowledge with my students, like, you guys come from a place of privilege, like, don't doubt that. But what is interesting about our school is that we're a Catholic school, and so service is ingrained in the mission. I think our mission is for every knight, which is our mascot, to make a positive contribution to the earth and its people. And to use that privilege in order to serve. And there's always a staff member at our school that's like, well, okay, you can integrate that and you can have this and do that, but how is it going to allow our kids to feel like they have a responsibility to serve? And that's, I think, I'm really lucky to come from a place and an education system where that was just the foundation. It was like a root that you never really saw. And I think growing up, I definitely took it for granted. I just didn't know that there were other lessons out there, right? That was just how I was raised. And it's super interesting now to be part of a school that like is definitely raising kids who are privileged, and there is definitely a sense of entitlement there, but also our mandate is to have them serve. And what is the middle ground for us as a teacher is to how do you use tools, I guess, to be better and to make the community better. And I think that's where all three of us are definitely coming from places that are doing it in different ways, right?
Yeah, and Anna, I liked your connections to Alberta Education's mandates, because we have like the teacher quality standards, and now there's a leadership quality standards too, which is basically our guiding principles as professionals. And they recently redid those, and there's a section in there now about integrating technology, both as an educator and as a leader. So it's sort of this overarching mandate as well from our province that we should be giving our kids access to technology, because there's that kind of common thought that their jobs that they're going to go into don't exist yet. Yeah. Right? There's their jobs, their work, their careers are going to likely be technology driven. And so giving them access and recognizing that there is some privilege in there being so much access for some versus others, but that setting them all up to have that success, how can we work? And I like, Cassie, that you talked about like the student-led fundraiser to get technology, because that kind of brings in that piece of service into something that helps them build their technology skills, but kind of comes from a place of, this wasn't just given to you, you worked hard to get this. And I really like that.
Yeah, I love that. I know you've talked in the past about, servant leadership, and I think that from what you've talked about, it sounds like your school does a really good job of threading that through everything that you do. And, you think of, current technologies and the social media influence and how that can so easily take away from that type of experience, of being just a good citizen. Mm-hmm. And the whole digital citizenship thing we talked about, I think last time, comes into play. So I think that, it's our job as teachers to help them along those lines with all of this access to technology, especially in an environment where we're in a private school and they have access to a lot, right? Yeah.
And I think too, given where we come from, Anna, and our environments there, when I started to think about this project, and did that mind map too, I started to see these weird threads in terms of funding and in terms of, what our tuition really is for and what's the other side of the money, right? That we don't necessarily see. And I think we're all nonprofit, no? So it's interesting to come from three really different nonprofit worlds. I guess the last thing we can talk about is what do you think is, either a stakeholder that you didn't realize had such a large effect in your environments, or what's the greatest one that you came across, and the most significant one?
I think for myself, I didn't really think about the government component of the stakeholders. Like I always think, parents, teachers, students, administrators, like close in my bubble. But then I started to think about like our funders, because we have all government contracts for early intervention. And I think there's a lot of mandates that are coming right from Alberta Education. So thinking about the role that those stakeholders have, that they're not only funding our program, but they're also kind of dictating what we do within it, right? And how we integrate and our responsibilities to those stakeholders. So I was kind of interested to see how that larger scope of stakeholders, especially doing the mind map activity, really does influence what's going on right in my community.
I think I would say that the kind of our senior admin has been, if I look at even this COVID situation, has been such a strong influence in what we can do kind of on that classroom level. And so much of the time, my frustration with technology is about that I can't use something that I just want to try. And that goes back to what I was talking about before about the history of just how I want to do things. And so at my school, everybody has to do it exactly the same as the next classroom next to me. Right. And so that for me is just, it's so frustrating because I'm like, no, like, let's just roll with it and we'll try it out. But sometimes I need to sit back. And I think it's also a lesson for me in terms of when I go into that leadership position, that idea of that systems approach of we really need to consider everybody. And we do need to go through this together. And yes, you can have your few leaders that help you along and that motivate everybody else. But those senior admin have been like, no, this is what we're doing. This is how we're using it. And it needs to be the same across the board for our whole school. And because we are only one school, we have to do things together. And so that has been, I think, the biggest influence on what we can and cannot do.
Yeah. I mean, I think for my school, it's been really interesting to take a look at it and see just how much power our students have if they actually learned how to use their voices right and learned just how to navigate the system, right? Because they're the ones that are using it, so they should have a voice in the fund allocation of it. And that whole notion of getting one-to-one Chromebooks started out right as a service project.
That's
so
cool.
So interesting to see how that's developed and where it's gone in the last 3 years. One thing that I did kind of see is a place where we could improve is just, I mentioned it, but nobody wants to put their name on repairing, the drywall or repairing the broken windows. Nobody wants to donate money to like our LA room, right? And our learning assistance room. But people are chomping at the bit to donate to our like fancy schmancy robotics lab and put their name on that, right? Because it shines and it's beautiful and it's got robots. So obviously you're always grateful for donors and obviously you're grateful for funding, but there's so much more that makes our community great that sometimes the shine and the bright definitely detracts from that. And so I guess there's the positives of the students and then the negatives of like, I just wish other people would see the other cool things, right? And put their money somewhere else, but.
No, that's interesting. We actually, our school, we have a big spring fling every year that raises a ton of money from our Parents Auxiliary Committee. And they actually have a policy. My school likes policies. They don't do any technology. They won't donate any technology. Because of the rollover and the constant money that it takes to actually sustain it on an ongoing basis. So they do all the other shiny fancy stuff, like we got new water fountains, but they actually don't do technology.
Yeah, we had a weird instance in our school. I know we're wrapping up, but we had a weird instance where like our senior boys basketball team was playing at like Langley Event Center, which is a huge tournament. But our robotics team that a donor had invested, tons of money into was also playing on the same day. And the basketball team, that's free. The admission to that is free. And we've put in donors and fundraising into so much of the robotics. Like our student body chose basketball, obviously, over the robotics team. And it's like, we talked about it after as a staff, right? Like the tradition in the community is always going to be there. It doesn't need to always be the money. It doesn't always need to be the glitz, but it's also nice to have.
Yeah, it gives access to the opportunity, right?
You're not going to say no to somebody giving you money to start a robotics program.
Yeah.
Well, this was really good to reflect, though, you guys. Thanks for taking time to go through all that. It's neat to not only think about our own context, but share and collaborate about each other's context. Because although we're in different spaces, I feel we often have a lot of overlap, and it gives you another kind of perspective to think on when you're reflecting.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. And jumping back onto what Cassie was saying, that professional learning network has been something that you've really valued with, using technology in the right way. And so I think we're all really benefiting from that.
Toodles.